Anti-Semitism is the highest it's been since the Holocaust. In fact, it's not going away anytime soon unless we change. Around this time, nearly 2,000 years ago, Rabbi Yochanan was fighting anti-Semitism by sitting in front of the women's mikveh and sanctifying himself and allowing others to benefit from it. What's the connection? And bigger question is, can we use something from this story in order to fight anti-Semitism today? And the answer is yes. Tonight, the Jewish Intimacy lecture is going to teach you not only the answer to this very big question, but it's also going to answer the question that every single Jewish woman has had at some point. Why is mikveh night so difficult every single month? Something breaks, something gets ruined, there's an argument. Why? If it's such a big mitzvah, why so difficult? Tonight you're going to get the answers, and these answers are certainly going to change some lives, and in fact, can change the world if we simply listen to the words of the sages. Enjoy, share, and be holy. B'Shem Hashem na'aseh v'natzliach, Shiur Torah, Bruchim Habayim. We are back after some technical difficulties and continued technical difficulties that half the computer is struggling to work today, Baruch Hashem. To continue our series of the Jewish Intimacy series, tonight's shiur is going to be for the Refuah Shlema for Rabbi Ephraim ben Shulamit, Rabbanit Sarah bat Anat, Itamar ben Sarah, Rabbanit Levana bat Sarah, Avi Mori David ben Esriya, Imi Morati Doris bat Jora, Sarah bat Esther, and all of Am Yisrael and all the righteous Noahides, especially the ones that continue to contribute and help us with all the wonderful things that the organization is doing. Let me try to improve the sound on this one a little bit. Here we go. Baruch Hashem, if tonight's technical difficulties are any indication of what women face each month when they go to the mikveh, then you'll understand a little bit more about why this issue is such a pertinent issue. So tonight, we're going to continue this series and certainly get a better idea of one of the holiest nights of a Jewish marriage, which is the mikveh night. A night that could very well be full of holiness, but at the same token, it's prone to difficulties. There are many, many difficulties that happen on mikveh night, pretty much for all women and all families. And there's a reason for that. Now, before we get into the lecture, just to remind any of you that want to contribute and help us with all the wonderful things that we're doing, if you want to distribute some of the Hebrew books that we have, by myself, by Rabbi Ephraim, or you want to give out some of the USBs that have English lectures on them, just go to the kiruvstore.org, 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 and you can get some stuff for free to distribute in your community. If you want to donate to help us do all the amazing things that we're doing, you could donate on that website, or you could donate on bhtorah.org, or our regular website, be'ezrathashem.org. So, with that being said, the last lecture we had in this series was one that certainly taught a lot of people about not just necessarily the powerful thoughts that a person has, but also the significance of what Kabbalah is. Because unlike most of the shiurim that we do, where we generally don't really delve deeply into Kabbalah, the Igeret HaKodesh by the Ramban certainly delves into both the traditional, the mystical, the supernatural, as if he's walking in a park and he's familiar with everything that's there. So when a person is going to get into this series, just by simply looking at the title, they're usually going to expect something very different. They're going to expect, unfortunately, what they've seen in other places where they're simply talking about either common sense types of things where, be nice to each other, it's a good thing, have kids, or they're going to go into filthy places where they're going to tell you to do all types of things that are forbidden according to the Torah, forbidden thoughts, forbidden actions. So once you go into this series, as one of our dear students said recently, in the next in the podcast coming up, the series is just one of those things where if you listen to just one lecture, you're not going to get enough. You're going to need more than one. But once you get into this series, once you understand the teachings of the Ramban, literally your entire life, your marriage, your behavior at work, your behavior on day to day, your relationship with your kids, your learning of Torah, everything changes. And, so when a person looks at the title and says, Jewish intimacy, they have no idea how this Jewish intimacy is not something that's simply an animalistic, a physical thing that simply people do. But rather, it's a preparation that requires full attention all the time. Even when intimacy is forbidden because, your wife is forbidden to you for that time of the month. So it's important for a person to understand that everything that we've worked up to, everything that, a person has learned so far in this last 30 or so lectures, when the Ramban prepared us to start thinking differently, start preparing ourselves mentally, start preparing ourselves physically, by having a certain diet, not to eat right before intimacy or even close to it, not to eat heavy foods, eat healthy foods when possible, and a lot of things relating to the physical aspect of it a few lectures ago. And then he also started preparing us spiritually, where a person has to literally elevate themselves. Not just during that time, but actually well before it, throughout the entire day, throughout his and her entire life, because the fruits that you will produce all depend on how they were prepared. What kind of thoughts the couple had during the act is not something that you could just conjure up during the act. If you don't prepare for Shabbat, you don't eat on Shabbat. That's what the Gemara says in Masechet Gitin and several other places, where a person needs to understand that Jewish intimacy is a world of difference from what the world calls sexuality. Now, when it comes to physical pleasure, there's no doubt in my mind that the pleasure is also a world of difference in comparison to sexuality, where there's a lot better. It's as people that have already taken up some of the teachings that they've learned from this series have already told me that their life in every single aspect has transformed. Needless to say, the spiritual impact that it has on people is second to none. Why? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu said in Parashat Kedoshim, Kedoshim tiyu ki kadosh ani. You be holy because I am holy. And Rashi and the Ramban both come over there and comment on that pasuk in the Torah and tell us that Kedushah has nothing to do with your prayer or your tefillin or how much tzedakah that you give or whether you will learn Torah or not, but rather Kedushah comes from how you observe how you maintain your morality, meaning how you treat intimacy. If you treat intimacy, if you treat sensuality, if you treat it in a holy, modest fashion, certainly you could achieve true holiness. If you don't, holiness will only be in your imagination. Now, I know that some of you that are watching on TikTok don't realize perhaps that, when we mention specific subjects that are unfortunately common and disgusting, but needless to say, need to be mentioned, there are some people that either complain or simply press the report button, and therefore it throws us offline. So anyone that is watching the lecture and I get thrown offline, you could always watch this lecture live, as I'm speaking right now, by going to our bh.live website, where you can watch the lecture live. So if I get thrown off for saying something that is apparently too holy for the internet, you can go to bh.live. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is because this unfortunately happens often during this particular series. Because when you talk about sensuality in a filthy way, the internet loves it. TikTok loves it. Facebook loves it. Everyone loves it. the Satan loves it. When you talk about it in a holy way, then of course, the fight is on. So it's important for people to understand that the topics are not here, this discussion is not here to attack anyone in particular, but at the same token, we're not politically correct. We're not going to reserve ourselves and simply not mention certain things just because your little lefty liberal ears are too sensitive to hear the truth. So it's important for a person to know that if a person wants to achieve holiness, they have to, part of the process will be to eliminate their predisposition, meaning eliminate everything you know about sensuality, everything you know about morality, because what you've learned in school, what you've learned in the streets, what you've learned through life experience is certainly not going to teach you these things. And is certainly going to teach you the opposite, especially in the world today where the he is a she and the she is a he, and people are even now pretending to be birds and cats. And this is not a joke, this is literally true. So, sadly, when it comes to sensuality, when it comes to morality, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is very specific since from the beginning of the Torah of how a relationship, a marriage, is supposed to be between a man and a woman, nothing else. And it's not just supposed to be a man and a woman, but it also has to be a commitment, loyalty. Adultery is strictly forbidden. Immorality, where a person is watching pornography, having filthy behavior, filthy thoughts, not protecting their eyes and looking at all types of things that are, other people's wives. These are all things that are strictly forbidden. Not only forbidden because they'll eventually be punished for, but also because each one of these types of behaviors damages the soul, damages the neshama that a person has. And your eyes are the windows to the soul. When you don't protect your eyes, you are in essence opening up the window for all of the missiles, all of the rockets, all of the poison of the world to attack you and start deforming your mind into a thought process that is certainly going to hurt your life and already begin the punishment during your life. There's a reason why the divorce rate in Western society is the highest it's ever been by by a huge mark. You can't even compare the divorce rates of today to the ones of 100 years ago, 200 years ago. Divorce has become standard today. Adultery has become standard today. Immorality has become standard today. And if a person is fine with that type of life, then they should stop the lecture and go watch, Bugs Bunny or something like that, or whatever other cartoon they want to watch. If they want to live a better life, if they want to elevate themselves, if they want to better themselves, if they want some sense of holiness, then this is where it's at. Not because I'm saying it, because everything that I'm reading to you is written over the last several thousand years. This is text from the Ramban that was written 750 years ago, of which he is piggybacking off of all of the teachings of the Torah for the last several thousand years. And in order to achieve holiness, a person needs to know, as we said in the lecture last week during Tisha B'Av, that you can't just make up your own rules and decide this is good just because I like it, or this is perfectly fine just because society says so. You have to understand that the designer of the world, the creator of the world, knows best, knows much more than you and I could ever know. And if he said that a marriage is not just for the sake of children, it's certainly not just for the sake of physical pleasure, it's certainly not for the sake of financial comfort, it's in order for you to achieve holiness. That's what it's for. That's what marriage is for. And because of that, there is holy things that could come out of a marriage, one of them being children. And since this holiness can create further holiness, the Satan will fight hardest during that time where there's actually mikveh night, where it's in essence the preparation for the holy act. So it's very common for Jewish women that are going to the mikveh, that day of the mikveh, to have a very difficult day, to try to ruin their mood, to try to put them in a bad mindset, to try to give difficulties to the husband, to remove the interest that they have, to try to make them think that it's not even necessary. And unfortunately today, the Jewish world is unaware of the magnitude of the mikveh until they learn some of these things. Certainly, the religious world, the Orthodox world, is going to the mikveh. Women are going to the mikveh, but unfortunately, not all. Certainly the secular world, almost virtually none of them go to the mikveh, and then they are surprised that their kids grow up to be little terrorists, both spiritually and otherwise. But the same token, even in the so-called religious world, there was a PW research that came out, I would say something like probably 6 or 7 years ago, that reported that nearly 40%, or even over 40% of the modern Orthodox women admit to not going to the mikveh, to not observing family purity, which means that every single one of them and their husband are violating a Isur Karet on a regular basis throughout the entire month, every single day. Because even when they're not together, they're still not allowed to touch each other. She's nida. A woman doesn't go to the mikveh, she's nida. She's forbidden for her husband to even hold her hand and do anything else, needless to say, the act. This also brings problematic children. This brings problems in the marriage. This brings curses. So anyone that wants to get cursed by God, don't go to the mikveh. Now, of course, a mikveh is only for married Jewish women. Single Jewish women are forbidden from going to the mikveh. This is a takana from Chazal, that it's in order to eliminate immorality and people feeling like they could simply do whatever they want even without being married. It's forbidden for a Jewish woman to go to the mikveh unless she's married. And it's certainly forbidden for non-Jewish women to go to the mikveh. Now, when it comes to men, Jewish men can go to the mikveh, but they don't have to. It's not an obligation in any way, shape, or form. In fact, the conditions of a Jewish man going to the mikveh are much more lenient than a woman. A woman has to go to a specific place that's a mikveh. There has to be 40 se'ah, which is the quantity of water, of rainwater, in that pool that she's dipping in. Whether it's in a mikveh, which is in most Jewish communities, they have multiple mikvehs, and today they're very fancy. They're even fancier than some of the nicest spas. But in the older days, where they didn't have the type of money and luxury like we have in the world today, women would dip in in the ocean, or in rivers, or in a cave that had a rainwater, like a hole in it with rainwater. The conditions were very different, were very, very difficult. So some of the luxuries that we have today, unfortunately, people are not taking advantage of them, and they're not realizing that this is the root of all of their problems. As many of the sages have discussed, the root of all of a person's problems begin with issues of holiness. If a woman doesn't go to the mikveh, certainly you're going to have problems. And I'm talking about a married Jewish woman. If you're going to the mikveh, but you still have problems, then of course we look at other things. But if a woman is not going into the mikveh, that is the first place you have to fix. If your wife is not going to the mikveh, you have a very, very serious problem. You're not allowed to be with her. You're not allowed to do anything. So, because there's so much that can come out on a positive end from a woman going to the mikveh, the Satan attacks. The Satan attacks heavily to try to do whatever he can to eliminate any possibility of a holy soul coming to the world. Now, as we've said early on in this series, when we're referring to holy souls that are coming to the world, they're not always necessarily going to be holy souls that end up being an actual physical baby. These holy sparks can be created just without actual baby coming to the world, just like Avraham Avinu and Sarah. created the neshamot for all of the converts in the world, and also some of the sages in the Gemara discuss this issue. So it's important to know that whether a baby comes out or doesn't come out, your act still can create holy neshamot, holiness into the world that will literally elevate the whole world as a result of it. Elevate your community, elevate the Jewish world, elevate the world at large, just because you did things according to what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to do it. When it's not done, and in fact, when there is impurity, when a woman doesn't go to the mikveh and is still with her husband, needless to say, when a boyfriend and a girlfriend are intimate, and certainly she did not go to the mikveh, when this type of promiscuity happens, when this type of immorality happens, or when this type of sin happens between a man and a woman, they're married, but they simply don't go to the mikveh, this is not only damaging to your marriage, damaging to your kids, but this is literally damaging the entire community and the entire world. So it's no wonder that in a generation where we have the most amount of luxury in the mikvehs and accessibility, we actually also have the biggest problem, where many kids are going off the derech, many people are confused, many marriages are breaking, and this is simply because women and men alike do not truly understand the value of the mikveh. And therefore the Ramban in this series literally tried to address every aspect of it. And one of the things that was mentioned multiple times in this series is what Rabbi Yochanan used to do in order to encourage the women to go to the mikveh, but also to encourage their mind to think appropriately. Rabbi Yochanan would sit in the front of the mikveh and let, whoever, all the women that are passing, going into the mikveh would see him and benefit from his beauty. Now this, for someone that is superficial and ignorant, immediately they're going to think that, this is inappropriate, or even better yet, they're going to say, what good can possibly come out of something like this? And therefore the Ramban elaborates to finish that point that we started last week, or the last time that we had a lecture, about your thought process. And that thought process, connecting it to that very holy night called Mikveh night. And the Ramban says, from this key which I have given to you, which is everything we spoke about in regards to elevating your thought process, to unite your thoughts with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to unite your thoughts with the Creator in such a fashion that you're not thinking of simply the physical pleasure anymore. You're not thinking of simply just relieving yourself anymore. There's more, a whole lot more, and both on the male and the female side. And anyone that wants to know further details, just simply go to the last lecture, because there's a lot in this one that we want to cover. So here the Ramban is telling us this key that he's given to us is now going to enable us to understand what that chassid, we call Rabbi Yochanan that chassid, that saintly chassid, that saintly sage, who sat at the entrance of the mikveh in order that the thoughts of women who went there to immerse themselves would adhere their thoughts to his form, and his form was adhered to the higher realms. Here we have something that is mentioned already multiple times in this series, and also multiple times in the Gemara. The Gemara in Masechet Brachot, page 20a, says that Rabbi Yochanan would sit in the front of the mikveh and allow the women that are going to the mikveh to look at him while he's connecting his thoughts to Hashem, while he's learning Torah. He's not looking at any of them, and we'll understand why in a moment. And when his own Talmidim asked him, but why do you do this? And he said, so they have good kids like me. So they have beautiful kids like me. And they said to him, but Rebbe, aren't you worried about ayn hara, evil eye? That, people understand how beautiful you are. And they're going to give you an evil eye? Rabbi Yochanan responds saying, no, I am from the seed of Yosef HaTzadik. And therefore I have no need to worry about ayn hara. Now, from this alone, a person has to understand a few things. Number one, the physical beauty of Yosef HaTzadik was unlike anybody else that lived after him. He was so beautiful that at the time that he was alive, Eshet Potiphar, the wife of Potiphar, was so obsessed with him, she was willing to give up everything for him. She would change her outfit multiple times every day just to try to get him to look at her. And she literally became sick over the fact that he would ignore her and not want to be with her. When her friends saw her sick and said, why are you sick over this servant of yours? Who cares? You get whatever you want. She says, that's because you never saw him. That's why you're saying that. She says, come to my house. I'm going to have a party. And we're going to be in the kitchen. And then I'm going to call him over. And you see. And you tell me what you think. So she had a party at the house. And the women are in the kitchen. And they're cutting lemons. Or etrogim. In those days, the etrogim tasted differently. And people used to eat them much more often than they do today. They're cutting. And then the wife of Potiphar calls Yosef. And Yosef, of course, has to obey the master's wife. And he passes by. And as he passes by, the women are looking at him, enamored. They're all speechless. And they are so enamored that they forgot that they're all cutting their etrogim to the point that they all cut off their fingers. As beautiful as anybody is, male or female in the world, no one is remotely close to such beauty that somebody else could look at them, literally cut off a limb and not realize it. So, of course, this is not comprehensible to us. Because as soon as a person has an ingrown toenail, he can't even function. He has a little, a little scratch. He's, licking his wounds as if he just got shot. So, it's a world of difference from what we're used to. People look different. Needless to say, the sages, the forefathers. Now, this beauty of Yosef HaTzadik was distributed to the following generations in small segments. One of the people that acquired it, that was born with it, was Rabbi Yochanan. And Rabbi Yochanan was so beautiful, he had the beauty of a woman. So much so that one day he was dipping in the lake or in the river, and a man grabs him and turns him around thinking that he was a woman, and only to see his face like, oh, you're a man, but how are you so beautiful? He says to him, you think I'm beautiful? Wait till you see my sister. She's much more beautiful than me. But he was so beautiful that he was literally mistaken for a woman. He had no beard. He wasn't able to grow a beard. And the man that thought that he was a woman was actually ended up being his Talmid, Resh Lakish. Now, Resh Lakish at that time was the head criminal. He was the head of the mafia. And he was so enamored by the beauty that Rabbi Yochanan had that he said, how could this be for a man? You must, something. He said, listen, my sister is even more beautiful. And if you're willing to abandon your bad ways and go back to learning Torah, I'll let you marry her. Now, why does he say go back to learning Torah? Because the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer brings that in chapter 43 that Resh Lakish actually not only used to be religious, but he was actually taught by Rabbi Yoshai, and he became a rabbi. He was a rabbi at one point when he was younger, Talmid Chacham, and he befriended a few bad people who caused him to leave everything and become a criminal. So Resh Lakish was a off the derech former rabbi, Talmid Chacham, that became a top criminal. And that's why Rabbi Yochanan told him, if you come back to learning Torah, you do tshuva, I'll let you marry my sister. But only if you only learn Torah, nothing else, no business, no nothing else, because if you delve in anything else, lest you end up going back to where you fell last time. And the beauty of Rabbi Yochanan was to such an extreme that Resh Lakish agreed on the spot. And the moment he agreed, he lost his strength, he wasn't able to swim, he started drowning. That's how beautiful Rabbi Yochanan was. The Gemara in Masechet Brachot, on page 5, says that one time they entered a room, and there was no light in the room. So Rabbi Yochanan lifted his sleeve a little bit to show his wrist. The beauty from his skin brought light where the whole room lit up as if there is there's light. There's light everywhere. Now, as a side note, the Baalei Musar ask if his skin was shining to such an extreme, why did he need to lift his sleeve up? I mean, certainly his face wasn't covered. So, certainly his face was bright, his face was beautiful. Why didn't that bring light? And the Baalei Musar respond, they say, although his beauty was everywhere, there's an extra level of beauty to things that are covered, to parts of the body that are covered, especially if they don't need to be covered. Meaning, a man doesn't need to cover his wrists. But if a man is extra modest, then that in itself brings spiritual beauty. Needless to say, a woman that is modest, the more modest she is, the more beautiful she actually becomes. This you could actually see more in Jewish women that get older than people that are younger. Because when people are younger, typically people are attractive and so on, and that mindset is very different. But if a person sees a holy woman age, they'll actually see her become more beautiful in time. And one of the reasons for that is because as the woman continues her holiness, continues her modesty, continues bringing more spiritual light upon herself, all of that parts of the body that have been covered, all of the parts of the body that have been modest, all of the parts of the body that have been bringing down heavenly light actually become more beautiful. And in fact, one of the things you see that older religious Jewish women that are holy look much younger than secular women. Look much younger. She had 10 kids. She looks younger than a woman that's 35 years old with no kids. Why? This is one of the reasons. So Rabbi Yochanan was extraordinarily beautiful. But unlike the superficial thought that somebody would say, wait, so you wanted their kids to be physically beautiful, so apparently beauty is important. That's why the Gemara in Yerushalmi, in Masechet Rosh Hashanah, in segment 3, Halakha number 5, says the Gemara, the Torah itself, is not taught from one particular place, one particular statement. We don't learn an entire subject in the Torah from one particular place. Rather, the way the Torah, the more you learn it, the more you'll see that if there's a specific subject, whether it's this story or a bigger subject like the subject of reward and punishment, or anything else in the Torah, in one place it'll be poor, while another place it'll be rich. Meaning that you'll see in one place in the Talmud, in the Mishnah, in Divrei Chazal, in the Zohar, in one place that it's mentioned, you'll see, let's say, one line. Whereas in another place, you'll see 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, or even 5 paragraphs. In one place, you'll see the story one way. In another place, you'll see the same exact story, but it has an extra bit of information. And that extra bit of information makes all the difference in the world. And therefore, the Gemara says that if you look at the Gemara Maseret Bava Metzia, in page 84a, you'll see the same exact story about Rabbi Yochanan. Sitting in front of the mikveh, so the Jewish women that are going to the mikveh could benefit from his beauty. When he's asked by his Talmidim why he's doing it, he tells them, so their kids turn out to be good like me, beautiful like me, Torah scholars like me, dedicated to the Torah like me. Meaning the ultimate purpose here is for them to serve Hashem better. And when he's talking about beauty, he's not talking about physical beauty, but rather spiritual beauty. Now, how could such a thing be acquired by simply looking at a person? Because no one in the world can do such a thing today. No one has that type of elevated soul in the world. And needless to say, the people's minds are not in the same level. But first and foremost, a person needs to know that Rabbi Yochanan was not like the beauty of today, what people think is beauty. For example, one of the things that elevated his holiness is how he protected his eyes. In the Gemara in Masechet Bava Kama, page 117a, it says that Rabbi Yochanan had extra long eyebrows, so long that they would cover his eyes. Which means that unless he or somebody else would lift his eyebrows for him, because as he got older, he wasn't even able to do it himself, he had other people do it for him. The Gemara says that he wasn't even able to see his own Talmidim, his own students. And there was simply no need for it. So when he was sitting in the mikveh, he wasn't closing his eyes so he doesn't see the women. He simply couldn't see them because his eyebrows were covering them. As a side note, Rabbi Ephraim HaKohen, Alav Shalom, who was Rav Shalom Kohen, his father, Rabbi Ephraim HaKohen was one of the Mekubalim in Eretz Yisrael in the previous generation. He also had very big, eyebrows. And anytime he would go outside, go into the streets, he would put down his eyebrows to cover his eyes. So he doesn't have to see anything and damage his neshama. Because when a person allows himself to look at everything and anything that walks, certainly they're not going to achieve any realm of holiness. Now, no one is telling you that you have to walk around with your eyes closed. But it's important for a person to know that when we're referring to some of these tzaddikim that elevated themselves to such high levels, that's not just because they learned a lot of Torah and they were really smart and had a good memory. There were also different life changes that they did, different things that they took upon themselves that were above and beyond the norm. And they utilized different gifts that Hashem gave them in order to serve Hashem. Whereas today, every other guy sends me a message today about asking about whether they are, it's okay if they shave their body, if they tweeze their eyebrows, if they groom themselves. Literally, every other day I get a question from somebody asking me, why did I say in a shiur that men are not allowed to shave their body? And I told them, that's because it's halacha. The armpit and the pubic hair for a man are forbidden to be shaved or even cut with scissors. And one time a guy, not too long ago, asked me, listen, what if he wants to groom himself in those areas for shlom bayit? For shlom bayit, I asked him, how could that achieve shlom bayit? Why his wife is asking for it? He goes, no, it's because he likes it better, so it achieves shlom bayit. I said, that's not shlom bayit. That's just complete nonsense, an excuse. There's no permission for such a thing. Now, as far as other parts of the body, there's no problem. But people specifically want to groom themselves in those areas. The truth is, anyone that watched my film, Tikkun Abrit, knows that one of the ways that a person can sanctify themselves and not have the issues of wasting seed and immorality, one of the ways is to simply become less comfortable with yourself, not looking at yourself. If you don't look at yourself, you're never going to have these strange thoughts that you need to all of a sudden groom yourself like you're some type of Greek statue. And needless to say, as you get older, you're going to realize that what you did when you were younger was not only a waste of time, but was outright stupid. So, point being is that the more a person looks at themselves, the more comfortable they are with themselves, the more they are inclined to sin with themselves and with others. So if a person wants to attain holiness, they have to reverse. They have to go in a completely different direction. Needless to say, if they're married. But this is, again, for the men. Women, it's certainly different. Whether it's grooming and things of that nature, there's no issues with that whatsoever. Why? Because it's important for a woman to be beautiful. But, again, if a man starts thinking, oh, it's because it's okay for the woman, it's okay for the man, because she did this, I did this. Once you start acting like as if you're a woman, then you already are crossing the line into the place of impurity. So Rabbi Yochanan would sit there with his eyes covered, and the Gemara says that one time there was a visiting Talmid Chacham that was answering all of his questions. Bar Kapara was his name. He was an extraordinary Talmid Chacham, and each time somebody would answer the rabbi's questions, they would bring him up on the lines. Eventually, when the rabbi was so amazed by all of these answers, he wanted to see. He wanted to see who this person is. And the Gemara says his servants came, his Talmidim came, and they had this special kli, this special tool, where they would lift his eyebrows so he could see the Talmid. So, needless to say, when he was in the front of the mikveh, he wasn't looking, he wasn't able to look at anything. But what was he doing? What was he doing that was so pertinent to Bnot Israel on that specific day? Last time that we had the shiur, we talked about how a person can elevate their thought process to unite it with the upper worlds. In practice, this is the way we understand how many of the different miracles that we've seen happen from different sages happened. So, for example, everyone has heard the famous Baal Shem Tov stories. I'm not sure if the one I'm going to tell you is so famous, but there was one time that the Baal Shem Tov ran into the Bet Midrash in a panic. He approached a couple of the Talmidim, and in a panic and a hysteria, he said, "What did you do to him? What did you do to him?" And the Talmid sees his rabbi in a hysteria. He said, "To who? To what? What are you talking about? I didn't do anything. What did you do to your friend? What did you do to him? Why? Why did you do it?" He says, "I didn't do anything." "Well, what do you?" "Yes, you did. You did something to him. You hurt him. Why did you hurt him so bad? Why? Why did you do to him?" He says, No, we're just having an halachic debate. We're learning and we're debating. He says, yeah, but what did you do to him? He says, well, while we're learning, we're battling, we're debating. He's saying yes, he's saying no. And, I was just saying, like, to continue livening it up, I said, listen, I'm going to, defeat you and rip you up like a fish. And the Baal Shem Tov says, that's what you did. The Talmid was dumbfounded. What did I do? We're debating. Anyone that has been at a Bet Midrash, at a Kollel, you see the guys are learning. Some of them are very, very passionate, and they're going back and forth. Yes, no, I thought this, you thought that, and they go back and forth. It's literally like a war. And and certainly sometimes it's not a war that ends in 2 minutes. Literally, it's a whole day, every day. And there's a chemistry developed between the two people that are learning, and they talk to each other in certain ways. But sometimes people don't realize that although you said something just in passing, just as a joke, that doesn't mean that it stayed as a joke. And the Baal Shem Tov tells his students, you said it over here as a joke that you're going to rip him into pieces, but in Shamayim, that's exactly what it was. I was over there, I elevated my neshama to Shamayim, and all of a sudden I see my students, I see you take your friend and start ripping him up to pieces like a fish. Baruch Hashem that Hashem has mercy on us, and He does not count our thoughts as actions. Which, as a side note, the Gemara says is not the case with the non-Jews. Meaning, when you're a non-Jew, your thoughts are considered actions. So if a person has filthy thoughts, that is not just something that's superficial and meaningless. Meaning that sanctifying your mind is not just something that a Jew should aspire to do. Even the non-Jews need to do it. Another place that we see is in the Gemara Masechet Yoma. Gemara Masechet Yoma, most of it talks about Yom Kippur. And what happens on that day, both in this world and the upper world. At the time of the Bet HaMikdash, the Kohen Gadol would enter the Kodesh Kodashim. And the Gemara says that he went in there and tried to do everything he needed to do, the whole service that he needed to do inside the Kodesh Kodashim, as fast as possible. As fast as possible, because the whole time that he's in there, he has to be with complete focus and connecting his mind to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the upper heavens, because any thought that was other than that would be considered a desecration of God's name, and he would die on the spot. Udvar Hashem Baza, it's considered, that he desecrated God's name. And therefore the community would make sure that he knows to do it as fast as possible. And since no one else was able to go in there to check if he's alive, if he's dead, the Gemara says that they would have a chain, a golden chain, connected to his leg, and if he was not responsive, they didn't hear the bells anymore, they'd start pulling the chain. They'd start pulling the chain because they knew he was dead. They pulled the body out because no one else was able to enter. But at the same token, if he wasn't dead, but he was just quiet, and he took too long with his kavanot, they could pull his leg and literally make him fall. Why? Why are you taking so long? Don't you understand? Everyone is in danger right now, not just you. Danger with what? Danger of having a foreign thought. Now, when we're saying foreign thoughts, we're not talking about him thinking about the filth that people talk about openly in the world today. Foreign thoughts was even if he thought about his wife, that he misses her because he hasn't seen her in a week. Foreign thoughts is him thinking about, his house, his kids. Things that are perfectly fine any other time. But during those few minutes that he's inside Kodesh Kodeshim, his mind had to be as pure as humanly possible. Now, the Magid Mesharim, the Malach HaMagid of Rabbi Yosef Karo. Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Baal Shulchan Aruch, he had a Magid. A Magid is an angel. A personal angel that teaches a person Torah. And multiple Chachamim throughout the generations had a Magid. In fact, the whole Sefer, Tana Devei Eliyahu, was when Eliyahu Navi came down and was teaching Torah to one of the Chachamim. And other Chachamim had a Magid. But in this particular case, the story of the Magid became famous because the Rabbi Yosef Karo not only had written about all of his conversations between him and the Magid in a book, which eventually became a book called Magid Mesharim, but also there was a time that this Magid, in essence, showed itself to Rabbi Yosef Karo and several other Chachamim that were next to him. They were studying Torah all night with him. Now this Magid, this angel, tells Rabbi Yosef Karo multiple times in the Sefer that always imagine in your mind about a Kadosh Baruch Hu with a specific verse, Shiviti Hashem lenegdi tamid. Always think in your mind that Hashem is next to you. Think about the verse. Think about Hashem's name. Now, what's Hashem's name? It's different levels. You can think about the Tetragrammaton, the one that we have a film about called I forget what the name of the film is. Signature of God. It's called fantastic film talking about the Tetragrammaton, how it's shown in the creation itself. That's the famous Yud, K, Vav, and K. But then there are other names, other aspects of ways that you could present the name, where you would combine the Yud, K, Vav, K with Amunai. So you'd have the Yud, and then the Aleph, and then the Hey, and then the Dalit, and so on. You'd have one letter from this one letter from that one. Or you'd have a multiple combination. Sometimes some of the Sidurim have the name of Hashem presented in different ways. So, the Magid told Rabbi Yosef Karo, have this name on your mind all the time. What does that mean, all the time? When you tell somebody you should learn Torah all the time, today, that means learn Torah every day. If you can get the guy to learn for a couple of hours a day, you've already made a big accomplishment. When the Magid Mesharim was telling Rabbi Yosef Karo, have Hashem's mind, have Hashem's name in your mind all the time, he literally meant 24 hours a day, all the time. Literally all the time. Why? He says to him, never take a break, even a moment's break from thinking about a Kadosh Baruch Hu's name, and thereby you will elevate your mind to such a level that I will then allow you to make miracles greater than the previous generations. Things that have never been seen before, due to that elevated mind. Why? Why is elevating the mind going to allow Rabbi Yosef Karo to revive the dead, to fly in the air, to do whatever you think is miraculous? Very simple. The real you, that neshama is in your mind. That's also the cheder yichud, the room of where it's only you and Hashem. When a person elevates, sanctifies themselves physically, but then also mentally, and thinks about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they could learn how to elevate that thought to upper worlds. And each time they go to an upper world, an upper realm, it becomes, in essence, a new reality. So, while in this world, the physical world, physicality is the norm. As we spoke about in the last lecture, the upper worlds have different norms. So, the animals here, for example, are impure. In the upper worlds, they're all pure. Even the pig is pure. The lion is pure. All the animals are pure. All of them are majestic. All of them are completely different. Everything is different. In the upper world, where it's not subject to time, it's a different reality. In the upper world, where it's not subject to physicality, it's a different reality. In the upper world, what we consider miraculous here is nothing over there. It's every day. So when a person elevates themselves and connects and unites their mind with the upper worlds, that reality of the upper worlds can be pulled down into this world, thereby allowing the person, the tzaddik, that elevated himself, to bring that normal behavior that's there into this world, where in this world it is viewed as a miracle. So if bringing something, taking a bowl that's empty and turning it into a room full of oil, a room full of fish, a room full of whatever, gold, whatever you want it to, there, it's no big deal. Here, it's a miracle. How? It's by connecting that mind and elevating it to the upper levels. And therefore the Magid told Rabbi Yosef Karo, the way to do it is always think about Hashem. But not just think, oh, I love Hashem, and then you eat your bamba. Oh, I love Hashem, and then you need to go to and maybe make yourself lunch. Oh, I love Hashem. Oh, let me check my portfolio in the stock market. Oh, I love Hashem. Oh, look at that. Wow, she's pretty. No, that's not thinking about Hashem. That's thinking about yourself, and Hashem somehow fits in between the speeches. So here we have clear instructions from the Magid. Now, when we're talking about Rabbi Yochanan, obviously Rabbi Yochanan was greater than Rabbi Yosef Karo. If Rabbi Yosef Karo was expected to do such a thing, and was able to do such a thing, needless to say, Rabbi Yochanan, that lived more than 1,000 years before him, was doing the same thing, if not much more. And that's exactly what was happening at that mikveh. While Rabbi Yochanan was sitting there and the women are passing by, Rabbi Yochanan is elevating his mind to the upper heavens, bringing down, pulling down that holiness, pulling down that miraculousness, pulling down what's normal over there into this world where it's abnormal, where it's miraculous, and allowing that light of spirituality to be observed by these women and thereby benefit from it. Now you could say, yeah, but he could just simply tell them, have good thoughts. And that would be good too. Yes, but it would be nothing in comparison to them having the thoughts after they saw something. Why? Because whatever you see is what you think about. And the sages taught us that wherever a person's mind is, That's where he is. If your mind is, you're in the middle of praying, but you're thinking about work, in reality, that's where you are. You are at work. If you are in the middle of a discussion with your spouse, but your mind is about sports or about something else, don't be surprised that she's going to tell you, why you're not paying attention to me, even though you're looking straight at her. Because she knows your mind is not there. She knows you're thinking about something else. And that's where you're at. So when the women saw Rabbi Yochanan, while he is elevating his neshama to the upper heavens, their eyes saw something which brought a new reality to their mind. Because Rabbi Yochanan's mind was connected to the upper heavens. And on that, the Torah says, when a Jew elevates himself, it's not going to be unnoticed, even if he wants to be unnoticed. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu says in Sefer Dvarim, in chapter 28, verse 10, וראו כל עמי הארץ, כי שם השם נקרא עליך, ויראו ממך. That all of the nations will see that the name of Hashem is upon you, and they will all fear you. When a person has holiness upon himself, the nation's natural reaction to that is fear. When a person does not have holiness upon themselves, no one is afraid of them. When a person has impurity upon themselves, they're viewed as prey. This is why the Gemara says that, the different tzaddikim, whether it's the Daniel the prophet, or even or Chaim HaKadosh, or multiple other tzaddikim throughout the generations that were confronted with dangerous situations where they were thrown into a lion's den or in front of other types of beasts and so on, they were never afraid, and those animals never touched them. Because the animals that saw Daniel or the other tzaddikim throughout the generations were afraid of them, were petrified of them, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name was upon them. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name is upon you, the animals are afraid that they were created with a fear of people. But yet you see sometimes the animals attack people. They're not attacking holy people. They're attacking usually people that are unholy. Why? Because when a person is unholy and they do things like immorality and things of that nature, the image of their soul changes form to look like the prey of that animal. So while the holy person, the tzaddik, the Rabbi Yochanan, the Daniel, the Or Chaim HaKadosh, and all of the tzaddikim that were confronted with these animals, and the animals literally were petrified of them, where when Moshe Rabbeinu went into Paro's palace for the first time, Paro was so afraid of Moshe Rabbeinu that the Midrash Reuveni says that Paro relieved himself in front of everyone. He lost control of his orifices, of his body. Why? Because Paro had multiple gates, multiple doors around the palace, and all of them had a couple of lions there. And they would specifically have these lions to obviously make people afraid, and no one was able to enter. When Moshe Rabbeinu entered, all of the lions followed him, as if they were all his pets. So all of a sudden, you have Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron HaKohen enter the palace with 100 lions following them, all like little puppets, all like little puppies, nothing. And all of a sudden, the Midrash Reuveni says, Paro sees the bottom of the floor. He was the only one that saw this part. The bottom of the floor dissipate into nothing, and the Gehenom is below him. So this was one of the things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised to Moshe Rabbeinu, that Paro would be afraid of him. Those animals were afraid of Moshe because they saw his true neshama. When a person is unholy, that neshama, that soul that has the potential to be holy, becomes unholy, becomes damaged. And the damage is not just having holes in that soul, or it looking strange, or it looking like it has a black eye or something like that, but rather that soul could actually change image to look like the prey of those animals. So all of a sudden, that person that was born of a man and a woman looks like a zebra to that lion. That person that was born of a man and a woman looks like a baby seal to that great white shark. He looks like prey. Why? He desecrated his mind, and needless to say, he desecrated his body. So the Torah says and promises us, the more we sanctify ourselves, the more the nations will fear us. Right now, anti-Semitism in the United States, it's the highest it's ever been. The anti-Semitism of just a few years ago, that was in small circles and usually hidden and always censored and really mocked and in so many words, taken off the air. Anyone that would say deny the Holocaust or to say anti-Semitic things, people would they would remove his his job, his all types of things. But today, anti-Semitism in America has reached such a level that people are openly celebrating their anti-Semitism, publicizing all types of things against the Jewish people. And what you'll notice is that it's not only become public, it's not only become free for all, but it's also become acceptable. Recently, there was a flyer that came out that, like the previous generation of Nazis, is, in so many words, blaming everything on people that are Jewish or related to Jews. Even if it is against logic and against the truth, no one really cares about the truth when they're formulating hate. And they wrote, every single aspect of the COVID agenda is Jewish. The CDC director, Rochelle Walensky, is Jewish. CDC deputy director, Ann Shuchat, is Jewish. The chief of staff, Sherry Berger, is Jewish. The medical officer of CDC, Michelle Wolf, is Jewish. And they keep mentioning more names of Jewish people. But then there's some people that are not Jewish, like the HHS secretary, Xavier Becerra. So they call him a Shabbos Goy. The head of Pfizer, Albert Bourla, Jewish. Pfizer's chief scientist, Mikhail Dolstein, Jewish. Moderna CEO, Stefan Benzel, Shabbos Goy. He's not Jewish, but he's a Shabbos Goy. How does a Shabbos Goy? They just make it up. And so on and so forth. And then they say BlackRock and Vanguard are the two largest shareholders of both Pfizer and GlaxoSmithKline, as well as practically all of the media. And certainly behind Jewish power. Jewish power is behind the COVID and all of the conspiracy behind it. Now, if this was just a few imbeciles that have nothing to do, then you'd say, okay, why even mention it? But unfortunately, this is a whole new movement of hatred that is not just coming from people that are anti-Semitic, but it's also coming from people that consider themselves religious Christians. As they quote the New Testament, in this very same flyer, they quote the Revelations chapter 2, verse 9, of how they call the Jews the synagogue of Satan. Same thing like the Rasha, Imach Shimo V'Zichro, Farrakhan has been saying for many years. And these types of things, this type of hatred of the Jewish people is becoming more and more acceptable. Why is HaKadosh Baruch Hu ignoring people's never again campaigns to such an extent that not only is never again a joke now, but never again is becoming, I can't believe this is happening again? Where anti-Semitism, in the place that there are more Jews than any other place in the world, aside from Israel, is becoming standard. But it's also becoming standard in other parts of the world. Literally, exactly as what happened before the Holocaust. The book, History of Zionism, reveals not just what we've talked about in lectures where people ask, where was God during the Holocaust? And obviously the Jewish answer is, what do you mean, where was he? He made the Holocaust happen. The book, History of Zionism, gives us a better idea of where were the Jews before the Holocaust. And in the first several dozen pages, talks about the history of the Jewish people over the last couple of 100 years. And you see that the financial circumstances, the social circumstances of the Jews, according to secular perspective, was at the best it ever was right before the Holocaust. Meaning, Jews were accepted into the European Christian Catholic culture. They became government officials, medical professionals, politicians, entrepreneurs of all types. Many of them gained great wealth. Many of them abandoned any realm of Judaism, especially after some of the reform leaders furthered their community from Judaism by abandoning the mikveh and telling people you no longer need to dip in a mikveh. The women don't need to dip in a mikveh before they're together with their husbands. Needless to say, you don't even need to dip in mikveh and clean the body before you bury it. You don't need to circumcise the kids. One after another, they wrote a new set of laws that were the opposite of the real laws, desecrating God's name in public without shame, leading many of the people to distance themselves from Hashem in order to get closer to the secular and the Gentile world. But this didn't end there, because as the book also says, many of them weren't happy being secular. They liked being connected to something, but since they didn't want to go to the synagogue, they didn't want to put on tefillin, they didn't want to go to the mikveh, the natural step for them was simply to go and adopt idolatry by converting to Christianity and Catholicism. And conversion of Jews to Christianity and Catholicism started becoming a standard in European Jewry, whether it be in Hungary or in Germany, in different parts of Europe. There were literally entire communities of Jews abandoning Judaism and becoming Christians and Catholics. And at the same time, succeeding financially. So others would look at them and say, wow, since he converted, look, he now has a new house. He now has $1 million. He now has this. He now has that. Everyone thought that abandoning Judaism was profitable. No one thinks that anymore. Because in hindsight, you see that as they furthered themselves from Hashem, and became more like the Goyim, and in fact adopted the religion of the Goyim, and furthered themselves even further than you could even imagine when you look at them as little kids and where they all came from, so much so that many of their kids hated Judaism. So even to return back to the truth became almost like an impossibility for some of them. At some point, Hashem said, enough is enough. And that enough is enough when it comes from Hashem is not a painless process. As suddenly, these very same Goyim that told them they need to convert, accepted them as converts, all of a sudden changed their mind and started a whole new level of hatred for the Jews the world hasn't seen in hundreds of years before that. Where all of a sudden they said, listen, even if they convert to Christianity, they're still Jewish. And they're taking over the job market, and they're taking over the this, and they're taking over that, and they're making too much money. And all of a sudden, a new government was elected in Germany in the late 1800s, where more than 30% of the officials that were elected were only elected because they hated Jews. Not because they had good ideas, not because they were financial wizards, not because they had any other thing other than the fact that they could express their hatred of Jews better than the next guy. So just a week ago, just a month ago, just a year ago, you were welcoming them into your communities, you were associating with them, you were even voting for them, going to them for professional services. Now all of a sudden, the Jew became the biggest enemy. And this continued to grow until it culminated with the Holocaust itself. But all of this, Rabotai, didn't happen overnight, although it seems like it. The major events that took things and that were deteriorating over a period of time to the next level of impurity was once the Reform leaders canceled family purity. Once they canceled family purity, once they canceled the mikveh, and in essence established a new set of laws, Rabbi Israel Misalant said, they set a new Shulchan Aruch, a new set of laws. We will see that one day HaKadosh Baruch Hu will send the Gentiles with their new set of rules that remind us of what our real set of rules is. Meaning that the Gentiles are going to publicize rules that are really what the Torah says, that the Reform don't want to follow. The ones that we have in our Shulchan Aruch, that the Orthodox, that we follow today, to this day, all of these generations. But these people that abandon Judaism and have a new set of rules where they're abandoning the rules, that's the rule. You'll see that Hashem is going to send Esav and his descendants to establish a new set of rules. And this is exactly what happened, where the Nuremberg laws forbid intermarriage between Jews and Gentiles, the same as the Torah forbids intermarriage. Forbid immorality, men marrying other men, just like the Torah forbids it. And many other things that you'll see from there is exactly what the Jewish people have been following since the beginning of time. But unfortunately, when it comes that way, when it's a reminder by God, and when He's using Esav, when He's using the Gentiles to remind us of how important family purity is, how important Judaism is, how important our connection to Hashem is, that reminder is a reminder of a stick, not a reminder of a staff. The staff leads you to go to certain directions. The stick forces you to go, and it's painful. Rabbi Yochanan and the rest of the tzaddikim that taught Am Yisrael Torah wanted to elevate us to the highest possible level already from beginning our lives. Because even when someone that's very, very holy takes a step back, they're still in a state of holiness. They still know their way back home. One example was Resh Lakish. Resh Lakish was a Talmid Chacham, but then he abandoned everything. But because he still had that good foundation, it only took just a little more holiness of Rabbi Yochanan to convince him to come back. The woman that understands the power of the mikveh will understand that she has to go through difficulties. One of the great tzaddikim that was one of the 10 martyrs that was murdered at the time of the Beit HaMikdash in the most horrific way was Rabbi Ishmael Kohen Gadol. Rabbi Ishmael ben Elisha was Kodesh Kodashim. The Gemara says that when he would enter the Kodesh Kodashim of the Beit HaMikdash, the Shekhinah would ask him for a blessing. That's how holy he was. But he was also extraordinarily beautiful. And that's actually one of the things they did when they killed him. They peeled off his skin because he was so beautiful. This Rabbi Ishmael, when the decree was passed and he saw that tzaddikim were being murdered left and right, he elevated his neshama, and his neshama left his body and went up to heaven. Why? He wanted to ask the Bet Din of heaven if this decree is final or it can be cancelled. Just like you send a text message to your friend, just like you make a phone call, just like you go to a meeting whenever you feel like going to a meeting or you need to go to a meeting, Rabbi Ishmael decided he wants to have a meeting with the Bet Din of heaven. How? Simple. Took his neshama, went up to Shemaim. Body stayed here, but neshama went up there. Met with the Bet Din of heaven. They told him it's a decree. It's not cancelable. No problem. Once he knew that's the decree, came down, told the other tzaddikim, this is the decree, gave them the reasons behind it, and everyone accepted it with love. Now this Rabbi Ishmael didn't come out of nowhere. His holiness was planned ahead. The Sefer Sharei Dura says that the mother of Rabbi Ishmael, Tzadikah, Kedushah that she was, she knew she wanted to bring a holy neshama to the world. And the Midrash says that if a woman goes and dips in the mikveh, and then when she comes out of the mikveh and the first thing she sees is an impure animal, she should go and dip again. And that was the masoret that Rabbi Ishmael's mother had. She went into place, a cave, to dip. Obviously, these are not the pleasant, beautiful, comfort conditions of today. But needless to say, she went, she dipped, she got out, she sees a dog. Okay, the masoret she has is you have to dip again. She goes back. Again, the whole process, the undressing, the going in, the dipping, comes out, gets dressed, comes out of the cave. She sees a donkey. Goes back. Whole process in the mikveh, sanctifies herself, comes out, gets dressed, comes out of the cave, snake. Goes back in, dips, comes out, rat. Comes out, mouse. Comes out, a lion. The Sefer Sharei Dura says 80 times, literally a zoo was sent to her until the Malachei HaSharet went to HaKadosh Baruch Hu crying to him, how much agony are you going to bring to this poor woman? Please. HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him, silence. A big neshama needs to come. So it must have to endure this test. After 80 times of her going in and out, dressing, in 80 times, she doesn't give up. And after 80 times, the first thing she sees is Malach Michael that took on the image of her husband. So she thinks it's her husband. And Malach Michael, which means she's looking at pure holiness, not just her husband's image, but pure holiness. She's looking at Malach Michael. And he walks her all the way home. And therefore, when she enters, she thinks that this is her husband. He leaves, obviously, and her husband is there now. When she's together with her husband, she's thinking about only her husband the whole time. And from that came Ishmael. Came Rabbi Ishmael Kohen Gadol. When Rabbi Ishmael Kohen Gadol went up to Shamayim to find out if the Bet Din of heaven has decreed a final decree or this decree can be absolved, who met him? Michael, the angel, that looks just like Rabbi Ishmael Kohen Gadol. They look exactly alike. Why? The first thing that his mother looked at, although to her it looked like her husband, in reality, it was Rabbi Michael. That was Malach Michael. So her son that came out with extraordinary beauty, what did he look like? He looked like him. And he's the one that comforted him and told him, yes, this is the decree. This is the decree. Now, when a person sees such results, you have such a tzaddik as a son, you're okay, you know what? Yeah, it was worth it for her. It was worth it for her to dip in the mikveh 80 times. Go in, go out, go in, go out. But no one told her she's guaranteed, but she still did it. The same thing that Rabotai, no one is guaranteeing anybody what you're going to get aside from the Torah itself. When a person sanctifies themselves, when a woman sanctifies herself, she's guaranteed to get good results. Now, a couple of years ago, our organization published a little book called Azor Shebator. This was written by Rabbanit Shulamit Kachlon, Rav Ephraim's mother, who has been a Baalanit for about 40 plus years. And in this book, aside from talking about the mikveh and the holiness of the mikveh and family purity, the second section of the book is different stories that women sent us from all over the world about how special the mikveh is to them. And each story is more beautiful than the next, and this is some of them. A woman says, at the time of the corona, was still there, around the beginning of corona, everything was dark, everyone was depressed, everyone was obviously scared. And going to the mikveh became a bigger test than it was typically for this woman. She still stays strong and she goes to the mikveh. She gets to the mikveh and she sees everything is dark. From the outside, there's no lights. Waits. She knocks on the door, and the Balanit opens the door. She says, "Hi, I'm sorry, but there's the lights are out. The power is out." It's okay, fine. She has to dip into mikveh, but there's no power. Obviously, the water is not warm. You can't see anything, so you have to wait. Yeah, we have the electrician is coming. So they waited for the electrician. She says, 3 hours waiting for the electrician. Why? You can't be with your husband until you dip in the mikveh. But you can't dip in the mikveh. It's all dark. 3 hours, she says, I'm waiting. Look at the Maaseh Satan here. This woman hasn't had a child in a long time, waiting for a blessing. 3 hours, waiting for an electrician. Electrician comes. Works on it. Turns it on. Doesn't work. Turns it on. Doesn't work. Says, I'm sorry, I can't do anything. I'm sorry. Can't do nothing. Doesn't work. Gotta bring somebody else. The poor woman, after 3 hours, and then watching the electrician fail at his job, she says, I'm not giving up. I'm going to dip in the mikveh anyway. The Balanit goes, what do you mean you dip in the mikveh? She goes, I'm dipping in the mikveh. You take my phone, use my phone as the flashlight, so you can check whatever you need to check, so there's no chatzitza, and I'll dip in the mikveh. Okay, you want to dip? Fine. She says, I decide to dip in the mikveh. The second I put my foot in the water, the lights turned on. It said in Baruch Hashem, a baby came from that mikveh. A baby came from that test. She was pregnant after that. Another woman, each one is anonymous, more or less. They either just mention their first name, like this one was Moriel, or they just put their initials. Another woman from Ashkelon. She says the Balanit that they have over there in their mikveh is unbelievable. She's so great that she always makes the girls laugh and she sings. She sings to them while they're all getting ready to go and dip in the mikveh. And she gives them a lot of tips and a lot of encouragement that they keep going. Tzadikah. The women that are Balaniot sometimes are very, very big tzadikot. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. Sometimes you have a difficult Balanit. The worst thing that a woman can do is be a Balanit if she doesn't want to be one. Years ago, story hit the papers in Israel. Shocked everyone. An older woman was attacked by a young man, tried to rob her. In the process, she fell and died. And they were prosecuting the young man for murder. When the trial started, they brought the guy, and his obviously his family came to the court. And as soon as they presented the case, they also put a picture of the woman that died in front. And as soon as they put the picture in, all of a sudden there was a scream in the crowd by the guy's mother, and she fell and passed out. Obviously, everybody came to her, splashed her face with some water, woke her up, got her back to consciousness. What happened? What's wrong? The trial hasn't finished yet. Why are you screaming? She says, you don't understand. 18 years ago, I was a younger woman, and my husband, it's a very tough man. He was very abusive and scary, and he always told me, don't miss the mikveh, don't miss the mikveh. Make sure you're available, make sure you're available. And one time, I made a mistake, and I ran a little late. And by the time I got to the mikveh, the balanit was closing. I told her, oh, I'm sorry, I'm late. I know I had an appointment a half hour ago, but I'm sorry, I'm late. I'm here now. Please, just let me in. I'll dip quickly. The balanit said, no, lady. Listen, we made an appointment. You didn't show up on time. Come back tomorrow. Not going. I got to go. I have stuff to do. She said, no, but please, come on. I can't go home this way. You have to help me out. Please, help me out. She says, lady, I'm not helping anything out. I told you. I was here, ready. You weren't. You have to respect people's time. And she left her without allowing her to dip in the mikveh. The woman says, I was scared to death to go back to my husband and tell him I didn't dip in the mikveh. I knew that, my life's on the line here. So when I came home, I pretended like I went to the mikveh. And that night, we conceived my son, the same son that just attacked a woman and tried to rob her and killed her in the process. So while everybody's paying attention in the courtroom, still everyone's confused. So why did you scream? What does it have to do with anything? You don't understand. The woman that died in that picture, that's the balanit that didn't let me in. At that moment, I'm not sure if everybody else passed out or they started screaming or both. But surely this hit the papers. Sometimes the balanit is a tzadikah. Sometimes, not so much. These types of tests are part of the Satan's way to get you to simply not do it. Another woman says in the book, she'll never forget this. There was one Friday night, raining. It's a hurricane apparently, or some type of terrible weather. By the time she got to the mikveh, the balanit says, I'm sorry, but I forgot to turn on the heat on the water, so it's freezing. The water is freezing. She said to herself, I'm not giving up. How bad could it be? She said, as soon as I put my feet in the water, it was literally freezing. I wanted to literally, I was turning into an ice cube. But I didn't give up. I knew that this is part of the test. And Baruch Hashem, after dipping, that was the night we conceived our child. Another woman says she was moved to a new neighborhood and she was looking for a mikveh. On mikveh night that she made an appointment with, but she couldn't find it. For hours she's looking for it. Eventually, after looking for hours and almost giving up, she finally realized that the mikveh was literally across the street from her house. The miracle was very close, but the Satan didn't let her see it. He wanted her to give up. Another woman named Oshrit, says that one time they were over a relative's house, the in-law's house, on Shabbat. And the whole Shabbat, her brother-in-law was insulting her in front of everyone. And she kept telling herself, just be quiet, don't respond to him. And he's insulting, abusing her. And no one's defending nothing. She's quiet the whole time. At the end of Shabbat, everyone went on their way. And that month, the mikveh, that night she went to the mikveh, and that month she got pregnant. But literally, you see one story after another, being insulted by people, a woman rejecting a woman not to come in, Another woman says that she made an appointment with one mikveh, and she was in a new area. And when she got to a place, she realized it's not this fancy place that she thought it was. It was actually the wrong place. And it was already getting late. And she went to the wrong mikveh. She was hoping they'll let her in. And said, yeah, fine, we have an opening. You go and use this one. She goes, it wasn't really a nice one. But Baruch Hashem, I went to it. That night when I came home, I found out that there was a terrorist attack right around that mikveh that I was supposed to go to. Kadosh Baruch Hu, because a woman is fulfilling a mitzvah, you're a messenger of a mitzvah. Shem will protect you. Another woman, waiting for kids for 6 years, nothing. She goes to the mikveh, as she did every month, but this time was different. There's a lot of difficulties before, problems in the house, hot water didn't work, her husband made a few mistakes with the forgetting things, a lot of issues she mentions in the story. Eventually she gets to the mikveh night. As she's preparing, she hears there's a bunch of commotion outside of her room. She comes out, there's water everywhere, and her clothes and her bag and everything is in the water. One of the things popped or whatever, water everywhere. She said, what am I going to do? Said, beep wet. After go home with wet clothes, not comfortable, especially that she wasn't staying at our house. Went into the mikveh, came out of the mikveh, started preparing makeup and so on. The Balanit came in to say hello, and all of a sudden she sees that she missed the spot. There was actually apparently like something, a marker on her leg. And obviously if there was mark on her leg, she wasn't allowed to dip in the mikveh without taking that off. She says, you have to dip again. So what do you mean? With all the delay, everything is wet, all this problem. She goes, I'm sorry, you have to dip again. And she tried to comfort her and tell, listen, it's a mitzvah, do it. So it was a very, very big test for me, but the Balanit gave me encouragement. I took off the makeup, redid everything, went, dip again. 6 years of crying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That month I got pregnant. And literally this book is full of story after story of the difficult tests that holy Jewish women go through in order to fulfill this mitzvah of dipping in the mikveh. Why is HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowing this holy mitzvah to have such difficulty? Because any time a person wants to get a big gift, a gift that could change your life, a gift that could change the world, a gift that can fight the impurity of the world, a gift full of holiness, there must be tests. Holiness does not come for free. And that's why, Rabotai, the family purity is not just something that a woman is supposed to do by herself. The husband's job is not only to wait at home excited, but rather the preparation by the husband has to be already even a couple of days before. Why? Number one, the atmosphere, the mood must be at the best it possibly can be already well before this. Despite all the tests, despite all the difficulties. Somebody wants to argue, make sure it's not you. The wife wants to argue, make sure you don't argue back. You have kids, keep those kids contained, keep them active. Make sure that the day of the mikveh, you do some exercises with them, whatever you can do to make sure that they're tired, so they go to sleep early. And they don't interrupt that time. Make sure that the wife is not working so hard on that day. If you can cook, cook. If you can order food, order food. Whatever you can do to make it a more pleasing day, do it. Don't be one of these husbands that simply thinks that he's in a getting a served like a king and he doesn't have to do anything. If you're going to be that way with that type of mentality, and you're going to leave your wife to fight the Satan by herself, you're not going to succeed in achieving holiness. Why? Because Satan is too strong for one person. You have to do whatever you can to help your wife want to do this mitzvah. This mitzvah is so critical that even if a person has a huge event that day, whether it's a shiur Torah or it's a business meeting or whatever it is, if it's mikveh night, you have to cancel it. Why? If it's going to interrupt mikveh night, you have to cancel it. Why? Because mikveh night is that important. It's the foundation of Jewish marriage. And expect to have these tests. Expect the appointments to come dafka on mikveh night. Expect the phone calls to come dafka on mikveh night. Expect the problems and the pipes to break and the electric to go out and all types of annoying difficulties to come during that day. Not because you want them to, but rather because this is the way it works if Hashem is preparing a holy gift for you. Now that gift may not necessarily always be a brand new baby each time. But to achieve holiness is something that you can do every single time there's mikveh night. Every single time a man and his wife are together. When the Jewish people sanctify themselves with family purity, anti-Semitism ceases to exist. Not only because Hashem no longer needs to use the stick in order to lead us in the right direction, and he can go back to the staff instead, but because as soon as Am Yisrael sanctifies themselves, the verse from Sefer Dvarim is fulfilled, Vera'u kol amei haaretz, ki Shem Hashem nikra alecha, ve'yir'u mimeka. All of the nations will see that the name of God is upon you, and they will be afraid of you. Anti-Semitism ceases to exist, not because they like you all of a sudden, but rather because they're too afraid to go against you. If you want to fix anti-Semitism, stop worrying about what the anti-Semites are saying. Stop worrying about what the news is saying and the politicians are saying. Start worrying about the fact that 40% plus of Jewish women in modern Orthodox Jewry are not going to the mikveh. Start worrying about that the vast majority of Jewish women altogether, that are not even keeping Shabbat, needless to say, are not going to the mikveh. Start worrying about that there is immorality in every other home, to such an extent that it's acceptable behavior in many places. Worry about that. You'll fix the holiness, you'll eliminate anti-Semitism. Why? Because that's what the Torah says. If Torah didn't say it, it simply wouldn't exist. But once the Torah said it, that's reality. Thank you for learning with me. May Hashem bless each and every single one of you that watched with sincere interest to sanctify yourself and elevate yourself to be closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And may each one of us succeed in producing more holiness in our homes, to sanctify Hashem's name, to bring more Torah to the world, to bring more holiness to the world, more holiness to our marriages. And Bezat Hashem, eliminate anti-Semitism and all hatred with the one and only tool that we need, which is family purity that will help us achieve holiness. Thanks for learning with me, B'ezrat Hashem. We'll see each other again next week, as tomorrow there's no lecture. Anyone that wants to donate, support everything that we're doing, Baruch Hashem, you can donate on our website, be'ezrathashem.org, or bhtorah.org, or you can donate on Facebook, on YouTube, and many, many other different avenues of donating. Point being is, if you want to do something good and join us, you are welcome to. But regardless of whether you are or not donating, we're very happy that you are here to learn with us. Hashem bless you in everything that you do that's good. Kol tu b'cha b'atzlacha.
What do you think would happen if you wouldn't have found Rabbi Reuven's letter?
To be honest, a majority of my questions, it won't be answered immediately because I can just go and search up a personal question on YouTube search. For example, what does Rabbi Reuven say about keeping Shabbat? Instead of me going to the Bet Knesset, getting a sefer and reading it, to be honest, it would be a little harder. I would ask questions to other rabbis who I could find. It wouldn't be, in other words, as fast. My answers wouldn't come to me as fast as it would if I didn't find this channel, because this channel helped me very much. It would take a longer time for me to find the answer to my questions if I were just to simply read from books.